Passes. Moving on to new business. Do I have, would someone like to make the motion?
I would like to. That the Board adopt Resolution 2012-229 captioned as follows. Resolution directing legal counsel to submit comments to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, supporting termination of Crown Hydro's license to construct Crown Mill Hydroelectric Project.
It's been moved and seconded. Before we discuss this, I'd like to ask just council to just review why this is on the agenda and what the intention is.
Mr. President, on June 14th, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, issued a notice of initiation of proceeding to terminate license by implied surrender and soliciting comments and motions to intervene, dated June 14th, 2012. This notice came to our firm as your, for lack of a better word, registered representative, but also went out to the public in general, anyone who had signed up to follow these proceedings for project number 11175-024, known as the Crown Hydro LLC matter. Basically it states that it gives the name of the project, the license, the deadline for filing comments, protests, and motions to intervene by is July 19th, 2012. And basically it gives a description of the project, and it invites comments from those who are parties to the action and those who want to intervene. And I just forward this on to the President, and I think the board should be aware of it, and if they want to comment, now's the time to do it. I think I gave notice to the President in late June. We've had a kind of a strange schedule in July, and this was really the first opportunity to get it on a board meeting before the deadline.
And before Council Rice, or before we take questions, the intention was to just review actions the board has taken related to this item, and that's it. And express concern perhaps about any alteration or diminishment of water flow, which I think, again, this board has discussed and taken action on. We have not taken any action on or given any opinion on the new site. So we're not going to be addressing the new site. We're just reviewing our history on the project. That was my intention. Okay, questions. I see two. I think Commissioner Fine was first. Commissioner Fine.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'm a little bit puzzled by this. Number one, why it's coming up the way it is, why it's not coming through committee. Now it's new business. What bothers me is it's got sort of questionable business for us at this point. It's almost like, why are we doing this resolution? Is it because this board has exhibited we don't want Crown Hydro, so therefore we don't want Crown Hydro anywhere? Is it merely just water flow, as the President says? What really bothers me about that is we're now starting to take a position on this when Crown Hydro is not proposing to put the project in front of us or on our land, or taking our land, one or the other. And it's not only that, we're going to start spending money to take this position. And although I love spending money for our lawyer, and he does great work for us, I think we have a lot better uses of that money, especially when we talk about tight times. And I'm hearing day to day, why don't we have more lifeguards? Why don't we give swimming lessons to people who can't afford swimming lessons? And there's a whole slew of things like that, but especially those because they're presented today, and those are big issues for me that we need to have more lifeguards, we need to have more swimming lessons, and yet we're going to spend more on legal fees on something that, frankly, it's no longer affecting us in the greater sense, as it's not on our property. And I assume it's on land. Is it south of of our property where it was proposed before? It's farther south along the river, this land?
Councilor Rice.
Mr. President, Commissioner Fine, it's adjacent to it. It's on land that the Corps of Engineers own for the lock and dam.
Oh, it's the Corps. It's actually the Corps' property.
Right. So you could either be south or east, depending on the river curves at this point. But it's immediately adjacent to the land, and it's on the land that there's a fence between the Park Board land and the Corps of Engineers property, where they run the lock and dam.
So it's definitely not an area that's north of our property that they were proposing.
It's
sort of like
it's adjacent to the river, adjacent to our property, closer to the
river,
the channel of the river.
Okay. Well, I guess I have a problem with spending more money on this, and where do we end this kind of spending? You know, I'm making comments here, and if individual citizens or even commissioners want to make comments, they're of course welcome to do so.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarification, Commissioner Fine, this proceeding is for the termination of the license for Crown Hydro. It's not; they're not evaluating sites, and so we've been intimately involved in the project for 10 years. It would simply be reviewing the timeline of the Park Board's involvement on the project. That's
Well, I guess that since it's all public record, why do we have to spend money to do that? To tell, here's what the public record is. I mean, someone can hand that to them. There's a lot of people. Do we want to start getting involved? And what if they start asking questions of our council and want more information?
okay. Thank you, Commissioner Fine. Commissioner Commerce next.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do agree with the comments that Commissioner Fine made, but I'm also curious if the water flow issue was such a big item. It was not mentioned at all in this proposed resolution, and also if that is really one of the overriding, guiding worries that folks have or whatever. It's the Army Corps of Engineers that has control over that. They're the ones that regulate it, plus Mother Nature. I don't think there's an issue out there today. In fact, if we were looking at that in today's climate and water flow across the dam, it might have been better received, because no one could argue that there wasn't enough CFS going over the dam. So I also saw no reason why this should be something that we step forward and weigh in on. And the tone of this is not just simply, let us share with you our feeling and experience. It had a totally different tone. And at the end, we are giving our esteemed attorney, who I highly value his opinion too, pretty much carte blanche on what he wants to say without it ever coming back to us. And frankly, given how this looked, I'm reluctant to do that. And that's why I'm thinking that it going to committee, and I know there's a deadline, but our next meeting, we will have time to do this in committee, get something, we can work on it a little bit ahead of time, and then we can pass it that night. This is all transmitted by email, so it's not like you got to beat it to the post office to get it there on time. So I would strongly encourage us to follow our procedures and send this to committee like we normally would. And we're also short a couple of commissioners tonight. Not that that would necessarily change the vote, but I think that would be a good thing to give them opportunity to weigh in on this also, since this has been an issue of high interest to any number of us for quite a period of time. And I know there is absolutely no chance of changing anybody's idea on it. And if we are truly just reporting the history of our actions, then I'm comfortable with that as long as the history is accurate. Thank you.
And I'll make a comment before Commissioner Bourne. I'm going to review the letter, and it's going to be an objective review of our history. And some of Commissioner Rice's adjectives will likely be removed because it's going to be a review of our actions related to this item. That's what it is. And that's why I didn't see it needing to go to committee, because it's simply a review of our past actions. That's what it's going to be. That's what's going out. So, not that.
That's
not
what
that.
the
It's direct, well.
That's right.
Yeah. Commissioner Bourne.
Thank you, President Irwin. Commissioner Kummer, it sounds like we actually got another commissioner back on the roll call. It sounds like President Irwin just promoted Councilor Rice to commissioner. So we're back up one. You know, I'm kind of torn on this. I've developed some views on the project, and I have reason for opposing the project on parkland, but I do share some of Commissioner Fine and Commissioner Kummer's concerns as to where our position at this point is relevant. As you know, I oppose this on parkland because it's privatization of our parks by a by a private entity, and there's legitimate concern that it's endangering the falls, and those are the reasons why I oppose that on parkland. I don't know what my job is as a Park and Recreation Board commissioner to oppose this project on somebody else's land. I still have those same views. I think that that's public land someplace else, and I still hold those same views, but I just wonder where our standing is. And this resolution, as it's before me, doesn't say, President Irwin, with respect what you had commented on. This is saying that we support the termination of their efforts in maintaining their FERC license, which is not restating our history. I would be very open to restating our history and restating our organization's opposition and our well-developed reasons for that opposition. And I think in that, I mean, we can talk about the tactics that have been used to usurp local authority and a myriad of other tactics that kind of related to our opposition of the project. I also have issue with receiving a letter on one end that asks us for a letter of support to continue a FERC license, while in the paragraph before being referred to as disingenuous. So I kind of have issue with that too, but I really question if this is the appropriate resolution for what we're being asked to do.
A general comment, I think that it would be in order to have an amendment to change the wording, because we have not, as an organization, made a determination to support the termination. But I think a letter just outlining our history, I think, is appropriate, and that was my intention. I think Commissioner Kummer, I'm going to take you first because you suggested you have an amendment.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. The last resolve could, well, I'm assuming that this will be in the form of a letter rather than maybe a resolution type format. So that the MPRB direct President Irwin to submit comments to FERC outlining past MPRB historical relationships to Crown Hydroelectric Project.
You're making that as a...
I'm making amendment. That as a motion to amend, yes.
Okay, is there a second to that? Moved and seconded. Discussion of Commissioner Kummer's amendment. Commissioner Tabb? Okay, Vice President Walensky.
Thank you, Chair Irwin. I'm going to be real brief here. Well, I guess maybe it might not be brief. One of the questions asked was, why is it pertinent for us to send a letter? After all, it's not on our property. Well, I've gone through these records, and they go back more than 10 years. They go back into the 1990s. And one of the things that happened was the original reason and why this is called the Crown Mill hydro plant, because they were going to put it in the basement of the Crown Roller Building, which wasn't on our property. And we wrote a letter at that time saying, yeah, we support this as long as they don't come across our property. And what did they do? They went and they Crown Roller Milling said, no, we can't do it there. And so they went and they said, okay, now we want to put it on park property. And we're actually going to try and do eminent domain to put it on park property. I mean, this group of people went forward and they made an agreement. We wrote them a letter of support, and then they changed their mind and came back at us and said, no, we're going to do it a different way, opposite of what you asked us to do. So I think it behooves us to write a letter, because just because they say right now that they're going to put it on the Corps of Engineer property doesn't mean they're not going to turn around again and come back to Park Board property. They've done it in the past. So the second thing with that, and this is to Commissioner Fine, how do we stop spending money on this? We need to stop spending money on this. Well, I'll tell you how we stop spending money on this. When their license is pulled, they won't be back here. And I think it's time for that to happen. This has gone on for many, 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 many years, and it's time for it to stop. They've had over 20-some years to do this. They haven't got anywhere off the ground. Technology has changed. They bought turbines years ago. You might as well put biplanes in the air instead of supersonic jets with the way that technology changes if they're going to use those turbines. There's so many things now you can do to capture that energy out of the water that doesn't involve tempting the chance on a fragile landscape that's a central part of our history in Minneapolis. So I think, yes, we should write a letter, and we should include the history, including the part where it was going to be in the Crown Roller building, and then they tried to do eminent domain on us. That needs to be included. And so I'm going to support that we send a letter, and I want a factual history, as Carol Comer has, or Commissioner Comer has put there, because I want them to know why we wouldn't support this, why we think this license should go away. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Walensky. Commissioner Tapp.
I would like to agree with Commissioner Walensky on this one, and I'd also like to address some of the items that Commissioner Bourne brought up. I've probably read everything that's come across my desk on this, and it's been pretty lengthy. But the most recent project, yes, the intake is on Corps of Engineers land. But at this point, I don't think we have any idea. There are a lot of land ownership issues that I think would need to be resolved. So if this were to go forward, I think we have a whole new set of legal issues that we would need to be researching, and we would be sending Counselor Rice's next child through college on that, because I think those land issues around the river are going to be incredibly, incredibly difficult. I also think that when we look at what's going to be happening here, and we're talking about going underneath existing tunnels or around existing tunnels, again, we just don't know. The intake is one thing, but where's it going to go? Where's the water going to come out? I think that ends up being on our land. So again, we haven't seen the whole project, but I think if this were to go forward, it really does then end up back in our lap. And I'm very nervous about that. Do we have any idea how much we've already spent on this? I would love for you to pull that number for us sometime.
A lot.
That was the first two sons that went through college. And consequently, I think it is time to put a stake in the ground, a dagger in the dragon, whatever you want to call it, and just say enough is enough. We know that this is turning out to be just sort of a test of wills or something, but I mean, this is a group that sent turbines to our site when we had not even approved anything on our site, and they sent the turbines to us. I can't agree more with Commissioner Walensky, and you can tell we're pretty fired up about this. Thank you very much.
Okay, again, we're discussing Commissioner Comer's amendment that we're simply going to review the history of the project. Commissioner Breland.
I am speaking against the amendment. Again, I just received a letter from Mr. Keene. The third sentence says, the project development at the current location does not touch or impact land owned by the MPRB. We have a permanent easement smack dab in the middle of where this is proposed. I have been told and have read the documents that Crown Hydro would never seek eminent domain. I have read all the renewable energy reports for all these years, and I cannot say that those accurately describe any of the processes that I have been a part of. So I do support a letter that supports termination. I think there are the same questions about the viability of the actual location. I think the Corps of Engineers has been fairly clear in what I've read that this might be a terrible place to put a hydro, and that there are significant dangers about that facing wall being breached. That's a huge problem. Digging new tail races in places that have archaeological interest and geologic integrity, I just don't see this as a viable proposal, and I see this as an ongoing challenge for the Park Board, because we are not standing on the sidelines. We are, again, smack dab in the middle, and what Crown Hydro has written to FERC, I have not seen them be accurate about how our land is impacted by their proposal. It is clearly, absolutely impacted. I have a sentence in front of me that is completely untrue. I am willing to vote for termination.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Vreeland. Commissioner Kummer.
Well, this is all, thank you, President Irwin. This is deja vu all over again, but I think maybe I hope you're taking notes so you know what to put in your letter, as if you needed any. And that question of permanent easement, I have heard, this is the frustrating thing about this whole project throughout, and none of us were here in 1999 when it first started. And you may or may not know, or you should know, that in 1999 it was a totally different group of people. Totally different group of people. They have changed. It's evolved over the years. The company isn't even owned by the same people anymore. And when it started out as a Crown roller mill project in there, it seemed like a very good idea. And to say that somehow the Park Board was snookered, you know, again, it sort of brings up this whole thing about how reasonable people can look at the same facts and come to totally different conclusions. And there's a lot of that going on here. So, but at this point, none of that's going to get settled. I just want us to have a kind of a process, something that goes forward to them that doesn't come back to maybe haunt us someday, because some of the past decisions that have been made here may not actually be right. The turbines, I'm sorry, Commissioner Walensky, but I'm not an engineer. I don't think you are, and I believe turbines are still a very viable mechanical device that's used in a whole lot of things, including jet engines. And I have no idea what you're talking about as far as getting power out of the water using some new whatever. That would be great. It would be wonderful. I sure hope they don't come and try to put it anywhere near our property, because it'll never happen. Anyway, having said all that, I will stop and move the question.
Roll call.
Okay, question's been called. Roll call's been requested.
It would require a second to close debate.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. We could have a roll call on Commissioner Kummer's amendment.
Commissioner Bourne?
Can we restate the amendment for the record?
Commissioner Cummer, do you want to read the
Okay.
language change?
That the MPRB direct President Irwin submit comments to FERC outlining past MPRB's historical relationship to the Crown Mill hydroelectric project.
Your vote?
I don't think you can do that accurately, so no.
Okay.
Probably not.
Commissioner Fine?
Aye.
Commissioner Cummer?
Aye.
Commissioner Tabb?
No.
Commissioner Vreeland?
No.
Commissioner Walensky?
No.
President Irwin?
No.
2 ayes, 5 nays.
Okay, the motion fails. We're back to the original motion. Any further discussion on the original motion?
Call the roll.
Roll call requested. Commissioner Bourne, do you have a question on the original motion?
I have a comment, but if we're going to take the vote, I don't need to make a comment.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt, roll call's been requested on this.
Commissioner Bourne?
Pass for just 1 second. Come back to me.
Commissioner Fine?
No.
Commissioner Cummer?
No.
Commissioner Tabb?
Heck yes.
Commissioner Vreeland?
Aye.
Commissioner Walensky?
Yes.
Commissioner Bourne?
Aye.
President Irwin?
Aye. Motion passes.
5-2.
Okay. Moving on to P's and C's.